Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel. We are holding the meeting in Gwent Usk County Hall on Friday the 15th June. The first item on the agenda is to appoint a chair and vice chair for the ensuing year. Therefore, I'd like members to nominate somebody for the chair, please. That means re-electing Councillor John Guy as chair of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel. Councillor Guy has given apologies for today's meeting, so now I move forward to the vice chair for the ensuing year. Can I seek a nomination, please? We've had a nomination and we've had a seconder to re-elect the vice chair of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel, which is Mrs Gillian Howells. All members in agreement? And all members in agreement in terms of re-electing Councillor John Guy? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, members. During the absence of Councillor Guy today, then I'll take the meeting. So, welcome everybody to the meeting of the 15th of June, the Gwent Police and Crime Panel. If we can do introductions, please. We'll start with the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner.
Sean Curley, Commissioner's Chief Executive.
Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Darren Goward-Pask, Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer.
Peter Nuttall, Co-opted Member.
Jill Howells, Vice Chair and Co-opted Member.
Catherine Forbes-Thompson, Lead Officer to the panel.
Will Routley, Newport City Council.
Councillor Jason Jordan, Newport City Council.
Stuart Healy, Blaina Gwent County Borough Council.
Councillor Tony Eason, Monmouthshire County Council.
Colin Mann, Caerphilly County Borough.
Chris Hallhead, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Thank you all very much, members. Can we then take the next item on the agenda, which is declarations of interest? Any updates, please? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on for apologies for absence. I think we've already mentioned Councillor John Guy. Do we have any others?
Councillor Lisa Winnett.
Councillor Jez Kirby.
Okay, thank you all very much. So moving on then to approve and sign the minutes of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel meeting on the 21st of February 2018. So this was a specific meeting to consider the report on the Gwent Police and Crime Panel's Commissioner's proposed precept for 2018-19. Does anybody have any issues with the minutes on page 1 or page 2? No, thank you. Does anybody have any matters arising? No, thank you. Can I have a proposal that the minutes are accurate, please? Thank you. And a seconder, please. Second. Thank you very much. And can I take a vote that we're all agreed on the minutes? Thank you very much. Moving on then to the minutes of the 16th of March 2018. So again, we'll move through page by page. Any matters arising or issues? Page 3. Page 4.
Chair, it's not anything to do with accuracy, but in terms of matters arising. The penultimate paragraph on page 4, you will recall that Councillor Routley raised the issue of FGM at the last meeting. We took that away. We checked with Gwent Police, and indeed it's correct that there have been no reports made to Gwent Police about FGM. But however, because of your timely intervention on this matter, we've looked a bit further into this, particularly with the Aneurin-Bevan Health Board. And indeed they tell us that they certainly from time to time identify people at risk. No evidence of any crime committed within Gwent. That would be passed straight to the police, but as a result of that we'll now have a closer relationship on that matter so that we can be aware of any other people or children who may be at risk for a variety of reasons. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the update, Commissioner.
Just one that the first paragraph under item 4 on page 4, that the open invitation for members to attend the Joint Audit Committee is still there. Perhaps I'll circulate the forthcoming dates so members have them at their disposal.
Thank you, Darren. That would be helpful. Page 5, page 6, page 7, and excuse me, performance against the police and crime plan. I would like reflected in the minutes, just as an update, is that the minutes talk about the fact that we sought clarification, but I think we did actually raise a number of concerns, so I would like it reflected that we actually raised concerns, not that there was just a general discussion, and that we are looking to take forward some work on that area, please. Page 8. Okay. Can I have a proposer for the minutes, please? And a seconder. Moved. And a seconder. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. Agenda item 6 then is the Police and Crime Commissioner's update for June 18. So I'll pass over to you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I won't add anything orally on all the points in here. I think many are just self-explanatory, although clearly at the end I'll willingly take questions. I'll also be bringing in my colleagues as appropriate to talk about some of the ones that we've recorded here. And at the end, with your permission, there are a few items that I want to bring to the attention of the panel for their interest, really for their information, things that have developed further after the actual update was written and issued. In terms of 1.1, adverse childhood experiences, my deputy, Larry Thomas, has done a lot on this and is leading on it, and perhaps you could briefly explain where we're at.
Just thank you, Commissioner. Just to affirm, in addition to the narratives in the report, that we have appointed to the posts outlined. The partnership lead post is yet to be communicated externally, but that post has been appointed to. We've progressed work on the Gwent delivery plan, which is currently in draft, but will be presented to a new governance board for the ACE's work in July at its first meeting. So we have determined a governance structure with partners for the work in Gwent, and we continue to work with the National ACES team to ensure that we deliver against the outline of the programme as agreed with the Home Office.
Thank you. In terms of 1.2, the diversion schemes, it's just to remind people really that this is very much about our priority of crime prevention and preventing offending and preventing reoffending. And we refer particularly here to two arms of that. Those indeed the Women's Diversionary Scheme, the Women's Pathfinder Scheme, and the programme that we have for young people, Positive Futures. They continue to be supported by my office. They are making a difference to either women who've entered the criminal justice system or just about to, in order to help them change the direction of their lives, and very importantly, helping to prevent young people from drifting into a life of crime. In terms of 1.3, mate crime, this is a very interesting and new development. Mate crime is a relatively new term, and it's a form of hate crime. And it's the case where a particularly vulnerable person, very often with significant learning difficulties, are befriended, in inverted commas, by individuals who are doing this in order to take advantage of them, to steal their property, or to abuse them in other ways, or what we call cuckooing, use their premises, for example, for drug trafficking, obviously without their knowledge and understanding. And what's very significant here is that the films have been produced by People First, Newport and Torvine, funded by my office. 4 short films have been produced, which star members of People First, people with significant learning difficulties, who've articulated their experiences, and they now produce these 4 short films. Chief Superintendent Mark Warrender appears at the beginning of all of them. I appear at the end of all of them, so people are getting fed up with our images and little speeches. But certainly there's absolutely no doubt that these films, if used, can make a real difference in terms of raising awareness. In other words, that people who are in similar positions can say, hang on a minute, that's happening to me. I better tell someone about it. It doesn't have to be the police, could be social services or a responsible adult, and then the message gets passed on and we can do things about it. In terms of 2.1, modern slavery and human trafficking, that's work that you'll know I'm heavily involved in, both in terms of the Gwent and Welsh level, and also now in terms of an England and Wales level. And the work of the Welsh Government Modern Slavery Group will be presenting to the England and Wales Association of Police and Crime Commissioners Modern Slavery Group in July. And it is generally agreed that the work we're doing in Wales is pioneering, and also what we're mentioning here is the additional work that we're leading from Gwent in terms of helping to promote the issues amongst faith communities. And we've had some extra money for doing that, and we are certainly looking towards another major conference in October of this year to again raise the problems of human trafficking and modern slavery. In terms of the Keep Safe scheme, you can see there, I don't think I need to say much more, but once again we're working closely with the People First groups in order to help spread the word about how help can be provided to people who want to make reports to the police or other authorities but have difficulties in doing so. Some brief notes there about the Safer Gwent funding. That's the partnership that we have with local authorities and others, third sector, to actually ensure that communities in Gwent are as safe as they can be within resources, and we're continuing to fund that service. I'll ask Larry Thomas to brief you on 2.4 and 2.5 together.
Just to confirm to the panel that the Wellbeing and Vulnerability Strategy will be launched at an event for police officers on domestic abuse to raise awareness around our responsibilities to combat domestic abuse and violence, as well as then focusing on the importance of promoting wellbeing of our most vulnerable members in our communities. Equally, we have concluded the review of sexual abuse, violence and exploitation services, and we are currently working through the process of sharing the outcomes of that review with stakeholders, and will in due course provide a briefing to the panel.
Thank you. In terms of 3.2, if I may move to that, just to give you an update, we continue to support the High Sheriff's Community Fund, providing roughly 50% of the money that they make available for grants. We had an event to make the awards in Caerphilly, in Tipanachta, in Caerphilly Borough, just a month or so ago. It's an interesting format. It's peer-led. The groups will vote amongst themselves. Those presenting for money will vote amongst themselves about which of the other groups should be awarded monies from the High Sheriff's Fund. This is the second year that I've participated personally in it. I find it very interesting, but I couldn't help but note that under the current arrangements for awarding the monies, most of the groups, this time round there were 26 groups that put forward presentations, 22 of them got money and the remaining few didn't get anything. And I felt fine, okay, well I suppose democracy was at play here, but I've suggested that perhaps the High Sheriff might want to reconsider how they award those monies and look at some tapering mechanism so that no group actually leaves that award without anything at all, completely empty-handed. So that is going to be looked at. Won't be my decision, it's a matter for the High Sheriff, but it's something that I thought ought to be considered. With 3.3, now we've just begun the new Police Communities Fund, which is taken over from the Partnership Fund based on two sources of income. One is the Proceeds of Crime Act and the sale of lost property, mainly proceeds of crime. And we have now, as you'll be aware, changed the emphasis greatly so that it focuses much more directly on supporting, through neighbourhood policing teams, organisations and individuals that can work with young people in financially disadvantaged areas on a variety of projects, tasks, as long as they can be linked into the priorities of the police and crime plan. So we've begun. We've got 2 or 3 bigger projects than the Partnership Fund used to allow for, approved, and we're going forward. There'll be a number of rounds to it. There'll be another one coming up soon. And I really wanted to remind you, particularly those of you who are local councillors, that if you know of organisations that can support in general that type of fund and can make good use of it, please make sure you engage with your local neighbourhood policing team to point them in that direction. Any difficulties in doing that or anything you want to discuss, please contact myself or my team and we'll see what we can do to help. But that's an invitation to yourselves. Already talked in terms of 4.1 about the Safer Gwent funding. A bit more information there about it. Nearly 10,000 individuals, as you see, engage through the programme annually on Positive Futures. About young people, I mentioned that. And there is further information in the draft annual report of the work of my office a little later on, which I'm sure you've read and you might want to take up further. I will now ask Sean Curley, my Chief Executive, if you could explain a bit briefly in terms of 5.1 and 5.2.
Okay. Just in relation to the General Data Protection Regulation, I just want to provide assurances. I think it's quite a comprehensive update there, but just moving on since this was produced, 2 of the electronic training packages have already been delivered, and we are working closely with Gwent Police to make sure that they are in a position where the Information Commissioner's Office will be comfortable with where they are so far with preparations for the General Data Protection Regulation. In relation to the Public Response Unit, obviously you can see there that there's been a drop in the numbers of queries to the Public Response Unit since this time last year. Looking into it over the last week or so, it appears that more issues are being dealt with in the first point of contact by police officers. So those are recorded by the Professional Standards Department, and we're going to do a piece of work now to look into almost the victims of their own success to a certain extent, because that's exactly what we were trying to encourage in the first instance, was really to be the facilitator between the member of the public and the police officers where there were low-level dissatisfactions or low-level concerns that we wanted to be dealt with. So that's one of the things that we'll continue to monitor before the legislation changes, possibly early next year, in relation to the Policing and Crime Act responsibilities on complaints.
Thank you very much. Under 5.3, monitoring performance, one of the ways that I do this on a regular basis, roughly on a weekly basis, is one-to-ones with the Chief Constable to discuss issues that have come to my attention and ongoing matters. And you'll see the list there of issues that have been discussed recently. It's not an exhaustive list, but it gives you a good flavour of where we're at. The only one that I'll lift out at this point is the issue of crime statistics, which, as you're no doubt aware, they have fluctuated quite a bit, and there's always arguments about whether we're talking about the public's perception of crime, which is the England and Wales Crime Survey, or actual police crime statistics, which are a little different. We don't want to get into that sort of argument, but there's no doubt that in terms of violent crime, particularly the use of knives, there are worrying increases. And the police right across England and Wales are working hard to try to understand exactly why that is. We know a lot of it's down to serious and organised crime, particularly what we call the county lines, that is the trafficking of drugs. And on this point, I'm sure you'll all be pleased to note that yesterday there was a major operation by Gwent Police in Newport, where 14 people have been arrested. Obviously can't comment too much on the outcomes there, but the plan, of course, is that this will significantly disrupt the supply of Class A drugs across southern Wales. And this will be an ongoing programme for Gwent Police. In terms of the use of knives, fortunately, we don't have much in terms of the use of guns, although there were shootings in Cardiff not too long ago. I actually took part in the Jason Mohammed phone-in last week as a guest to talk about why this was. They seem to pick on me a lot, BBC Wales, but there we go. We need each other, I suppose. And it was a good discussion, I have to say, and perhaps there is now a better understanding of what the police have to deal with shrinking resources overall and the changing nature of crime. So I'll just mention that under there, but if anybody wants to come back on any of the other issues, they can. May I ask Sean Curley then to talk a little bit about the role of 5.4, the Legitimacy Scrutiny Panel?
Okay. Legitimacy Scrutiny Panel was set up...
Chair, can we just go back to 5.3? Is that okay? Yeah?
Should we take questions at the end?
At the end, that's fine.
Okay. Yes, the scrutiny panel was first set up in November. At the same time, a report came out about Gwent from Her Majesty's Inspectorate recommending that all police force areas have these type of panels to scrutinise sort of new developments, particularly in relation to body-worn video. We already had a panel which dip sampled stop and search, so that was already in existence. So we've enhanced it to include use of force generally, which is the term that covers anything like stop and search and use of body-worn video. It's actually been really useful. We've used the Gwent Police's independent advisory group members to come in and do the dip sample. What we're also doing is getting messages out internally to police officers about the feedback from that group as well. There does seem to have been a sort of a reduction in the use of stop and search, but I'm sure you've all seen that the use of stop and search itself is something which is playing out nationally on two different sides, where the NPCC, National Police Chiefs Council, is still in support, but obviously there are groups who believe that it's something that shouldn't be used, and it's the sort of big brother element to it. So we're monitoring that closely and updating the members so that we can properly at least make sure that the way it's used in Gwent is always appropriate.
Thank you. If I can move on then, I think there's quite a few there that are pretty self-explanatory, but happy to take questions if people wish. Under Key Achievements, point 6, behind the badge, I know that a number of you attended the event in Cumbraen on the 6th of June. Really was a great event. It's something that the Chief Constable and I have discussed at length about re-establishing public engagement events. We were blessed with an excellent day in terms of the weather. As you can see there, 15,000 people, that's our best estimate in terms of the counting we can do, attended the event in Cumbraen to have a look at the various aspects of policing and the other emergency services. I must stress that it wasn't only police services, and a number of third sector groups were also represented, including the crime prevention panels from a number of locations across Gwent, and all reported it as very satisfactory. They met a lot of people who had a lot of questions, and it's the sort of things that we shall be doing more of. Obviously, it takes a lot of organisation to do, but I think it's very important that people have the opportunity in an informal environment to speak to police officers and members of the Fire and Rescue Service, and indeed the ambulance service, as well as third sector groups, about their work. So we'll be doing, or at least it's the intention to do more of that, and to see how we can progress it. One of the highlights was the rescuing of the Chief Constable, Julian Williams, from the roof of headquarters by the Fire and Rescue Service. It was hot enough to actually be on fire, but much to our concern, we wondered if they'd managed to drop him or something, but they didn't. He was lowered safely to the ground, and I think we were impressed at their efficiency of the rescue. Point 7, Restorative Justice Conference, just to let you know how that happened. I invite Larry to mention it.
Just to say that the Restorative Justice Council worked closely with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner in Gwent to hold a very productive conference focusing on how organisations across Gwent are working to enhance the way we operate in relation to restorative justice, and to add to the narrative that's provided in the report that a new Restorative Justice Coordinator has been appointed for Gwent, who will start next week and will be housed and sit in Connect Gwent.
Thank you. And they're under key priorities. We list those. I won't go through them, but there is one not exactly missing, but it's something I want to be clear for the record that we take very seriously, and that's the point that your chair today alluded to about the issues of the performance reporting arrangements. And certainly we are giving a major, both ourselves and Gwent Police, a major priority to making sure we get that right. I'll talk a little later under the agenda item on that, but that's certainly a key priority for us as well. If I may then, Chair, in terms of some other issues that I'm sure the panel would be interested in, even though having no formal responsibilities as such. Those of you will have seen on the news last Friday that certainly the Police Federation had issued statements picked up by the BBC on the dilemma of the apprenticeship levy in Wales. That is quite an important issue for police and crime commissioners as well as chief constables. The chief constables obviously have major concerns and responsibilities for the training of police officers and the recruitment of police officers with the right level of qualifications. The current situation, and this has been going on for quite a few months, but it's come to a head now, is that the problem is basically this. Together with all organisations over a certain establishment size, the 4 police services in Wales have had to send 2%, I think it's 2%, 1% of the turnover to the Chancellor of the Exchequer as their contribution to the apprenticeship levy. The apprenticeship levy, it's the new way across the UK that apprentices will be funded and the money will then find its way back. This is the idea, through credits to those organisations for the training of apprentices, and that can be at any sort of stage in their development. And that includes the police. The Home Office say that they have sent the element for Gwent for policing back to the Welsh Government. That's because the Welsh Government is responsible for training. I know this because I was a former skills minister at the Welsh Government. But it comes back, of course, in one block grant. The Welsh Government then distributes money in accordance with its priorities. Understandably, policing is not a priority for the Welsh Government because policing is not devolved. So here's the dilemma. Where's our money? Putting it bluntly. Now, there's been arguments, both ends of the M4, well, not the end of the M4, the M4 is Swansea Way, but you know what I mean, between Welsh Government and UK Government on this, with us sort of watching from the sidelines to a degree. That cannot continue. We're now at a stage, because of the fact that policing will move to becoming a graduate profession through the Police Education and Qualifications Framework that's coming in before much longer. We've got to engage with higher education now in terms of developing higher level apprenticeships, because that's going to be a popular route for many into the profession. And they have to get their element right, and of course they'll want to be paid for that. So our argument is to both Welsh Government and the Home Office, please sort it out. We cannot tolerate the situation where police officers in Wales could be trained and qualified to a lower level of professionalism than their colleagues in England. And that's not to the advantage of English forces either, who want to have good cross-border collaboration. So it's got to be sorted out. We don't care who does it. We just want to make sure we've got access, in the case of Gwent, to our £500,000, 2.8 million across the whole of Wales. Because that's a significant sum of money. We either then, if we don't get it, train to a lower level, or we pay us again, and therefore have to take money from some other area of policing. Neither are acceptable. Discussions are continuing. In fact, were it not for this panel, which I obviously give priority to, I would be in Bridgend Police Headquarters now, where the chiefs and representatives of commissioners are meeting with the new chief executive at the Home Office, responsible for this area, to discuss this matter. We hope that discussion, I'll get a report this afternoon, is positive, and that we can go forward knowing that the matter is going to be sorted out wherever that money is. Ultimately, ultimately, and I made this clear in my BBC interview, even though they didn't report it, irritatingly, that responsibility, of course, for policing as a non-devolved public service rests with the Home Office and not the Welsh Government. That is a fact. And therefore the Home Office have to take primacy in this matter and take the initiative. But putting that to one side, we hope that goodwill will prevail and it'll get sorted. I also was interviewed, see how popular I am, on Good Morning Wales, on the drink awareness course that Gwent is initiating. Very similar to the speed awareness courses that are offered to people offending for the first time in speeding, in that if someone is arrested for that's related to a drinking offence or excessive drinking rather within Wales, the custody sergeant will have the option to decide whether to offer them a drink awareness course so that they can understand what they're doing to themselves, their family, friends and potential victims, and change their ways rather than put them into the criminal justice system. There'll obviously be certain conditions to be met. It depends on the nature of the offence, the severity of it, and whether that person has been arrested before or not. If the person is offered the course and they refuse to take it up, then of course criminal proceedings will proceed. I had a bit of an argy-bargy with the reporter who wanted me to say how many people every year were arrested for drinking in Gwent, and I had to say, well, I don't have that figure. It fluctuates enormously, but the police will have it, and they're giving interviews later. But you know, that's how it goes. But that is a new offer that Gwent Police will have. The first time it's beginning in Wales. As a member of the 4 Police and Crime Commissioners, and I chair the 4 Police and Crime Commissioners in Gwent now for this year, we're giving evidence to the Thomas Commission, which is the commission set up by the First Minister to look at devolving the criminal justice system to Wales and the issues that would be involved. We've just returned from a visioning day where senior representatives of the police and the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office from across Wales met in North Wales to discuss common issues and look at how we can go forward together with the Welsh Government as a partner in terms of highlighting the role of policing in Wales as part of the one public service ethos. And good ideas have come out of there, and more will be heard in due course. And the final point, then I will shut up, Chair, is that I'm very pleased to see that we've been awarded the Armed Forces Covenant, the Bronze Award, which I've got here somewhere, which shows that we are engaging in providing opportunities for those who are ex-servicemen, and something that we take very seriously. So I'm pleased to say that we have that award as well, and just received it. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you very much for those updates. Firstly, can I say on the Behind the Badge Day, what a superb day it was. I mean, you know, congratulations to all the officers involved, and certainly to the other partner agencies they had there. Everything from the Scouts to the, you know, starting at the very young age to engage them. You know, even the blood bikes. They had a tiny little blood bike for the kids to sit on with the background. My daughter loved it. I just thought it was a great day for everything from children through to adults. I'd love to know how they decided who was going to drop the Chief Constable over the edge of the building. I'm sure there weren't many volunteers in the fire service, and that they double and triple checked those bands and the ropes before they dropped him over the top.
Well, strangely, it was the Deputy Chief Constable officer.
But you know, excellent work. It really was a very successful day. And I wonder, Kath, I should have mentioned this before, would it be possible for us to write as a panel to the Chief Constable, passing on the congratulations from the panel and the partner agencies on behalf of the panel for putting together such a successful day? That would be okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that.
It really was a very successful day. In terms of the apprenticeship levy, it's very interesting that you sort of mentioned that at the end, because one of our councillors actually wants to come in with a question on that later. But we met with the chairs and vice chairs and the leads of a number of other of all the Welsh authorities earlier this week, and that was something that was strongly raised by them, particularly, I think it was North Wales on our left, Kath. North Wales had done sort of a lot of work around this as well. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that we can do as a panel in terms of writing to the Home Office to support your concerns, I appreciate it's only a letter, but is there anything maybe, if you could give some thought to that, and maybe if we could put something in writing as a panel to support the actions that you're taking and the concerns that you've got in terms of taking that forward? It's probably opportune then if Councillor Healy, did you want to come in your question about the apprenticeship levy?
Chair, thank you. I think the Commissioner has dealt with it quite comprehensively. I would just hope that, as you say, this meeting this afternoon, that out of this meeting that we can now move forward, because potentially we could be losing very good officers over the border, as you say. So I would hope that this would be done very quickly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. In terms of your offer of writing to the Home Office, I think we'd say that everything helps to raise awareness, and certainly elected members. We want the emphasis now, because the media see an issue that they can report on and wind up. We want now there to be a realization that, look, this is about policing standards, professional standards. It's about the future. It's about the profession. And that's in everyone's interest to get it right. So we hope that that spirit will prevail now, and that's what we're trying to drive. But as I say, ultimately, the rest with the Home Office, we are not devolved, and therefore they must take the lead in ensuring that we have access to the money in the same way that English police forces have access to it through the College of Policing. I actually met a group of new student officers yesterday, and they were aware of the issue, which is good. They were also concerned about the future of the graduate entryship and wanted to talk to me about what that might mean for them in due course when graduates have to come on board one way or the other. And, I was hopefully able to give them reassurance that, that shouldn't disadvantage them in terms of their career, but that also they should take, as part of continuous professional development, opportunities that may present themselves to pursue the qualification once employed. But it is quite an important issue. We hope, we really do hope that common sense will prevail, but any extra support will be welcomed.
Okay, Chair, thank you for that. If I can liaise with Sean then to make sure we've got an appropriate response, and we can send a response from the panel as well. Okay. Yeah, so recorded for questions. We've got Councillor.
Whatever. Yeah, it seems to be the classic thing where one body is claiming money is gone, the other body is claiming they haven't got it or they can't find it or whatever. There was a situation a few years ago, and Darren will probably remember the detail, where money was being sent which should have actually improved the precept, and it never actually released from the Welsh Government. Do we actually know whether the Welsh Government has got the money and they're not releasing it, or are they claiming that they haven't got it?
You mean in terms of the apprenticeship levy?
Yeah, apprenticeship levy, sorry.
Well, I mean, unless the rules have changed dramatically, when I was the skills minister at the Assembly, the money came, now this was before the apprenticeship levy, of course, kicked in, because this is the first year proper. The money that is part of the block grant that we get, the Welsh Government gets from London, and don't forget, I know they got some tax raising powers now, but there was none at all then, so it was all dependent on the block grant. An element of that, of course, was for skills, but it was divvied up by the Welsh Government. And then the Welsh Government allocated that in accordance with its priorities. I'm obviously not party to or privy to any new arrangements that might be in place now that the apprenticeship levy is there. I know what's being said, but we've been assured so far by relevant Welsh Government ministers that the money isn't there. In fact, the overall amount of money has fallen. So we can only take their word for it. And at the same time, we have the counter-argument from the Home Office that they have sent it. So what is absolutely essential, and it's beginning now, is officials from the Home Office and the Welsh Government getting together to sort it out. Now, we don't care really where it is, as long as we got it. and that's got to be established. It's got to be somewhere. You can't, well, you could, I suppose. £500,000 is peanuts in terms of government monies, but it's got to be somewhere. And we just want access to it so we can do what we're meant to do with it, and that is train our officers and get the best recruits that we can. We will be having meetings with the relevant Welsh Cabinet Secretaries coming up within about 10 days' time. I've already put that down on the agenda for further discussion.
We wish you all your best in your efforts, and obviously as a panel I would support the panel doing what it can. Related, you mentioned the Thomas Commission and devolving powers. Obviously, devolution of powers would hopefully mean that this sort of situation didn't happen. Can you tell us what the thrust of the evidence is going in from commissioners to the Commission?
Okay, well, we're writing up the evidence now. I won't say too much about that, but we did have an informal discussion, first of all, with the Commission. And what I'm saying is public knowledge anyway. The 4 police and crime commissioners across Gwent support the devolution of policing to the Welsh Government, so that we have one master in that sense in terms of public service within Wales. There's no reason why, and we would support the principles of the devolution of criminal justice more generally to Wales, but they don't all have to happen at the same time. They can happen separately. So that was the main thrust of our argument, and I actually used the example of the apprenticeship levy as an issue where we'd have better clarity in future about where training monies was held and be able to negotiate directly with the Welsh Government in terms of what allocation we needed. So there would be a lot of pluses in that. You will appreciate that the Chief Constables have to be strictly neutral on this matter. It's not for them to argue political issues, but the Commissioners are different. I'm an elected official and I can argue within reason, within the law for anything. Well, I can argue to change the law, which I suppose in a sense is what we're doing. The Chief Constables are in a difficult, sometimes in different position.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you. Just 2 brief points. You mentioned in your report about the Usk show. I take it you'll be having a stand there. And there's also in Caldecott a 999 day, which we do with the local officers, have involvements in end of July, early August, and it is well attended. But the other point is, I don't know whether you read the Observer on the weekend, where there was compliments for your initiative on drinking. And it says, raise a glass to Gwent Police and their plan for drinkers. I think at least you had a comment which you didn't have your hide taken off when you were interviewed by BBC.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we do actually have a programme of engagement now across the summer. We will have a presence at Usk. 999 day, has it happened yet, or is it coming up?
It's been added for the last couple of years, and your local officers do get involved, or Chief Counsel officers do get involved.
We will be supportive, and I know I'm going to an event this Saturday just outside Chepstow, and I went to another one outside Chepstow a few weeks ago. So we do our very best, both in terms of representatives of senior officials of both the police and our office, but we will have personnel there to the very best of our ability. But I tell you what, there's an awful lot of them.
And you will be coming to my area committee in early July.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Peter Nuttall next, please.
Launch of Mate Crime Initiative. I'm heartily glad to see that. You talk about the films that are coming out, and I look forward to seeing those, which are targeting people with disabilities. I think it's far more a wider spread than we think, especially with the elderly. I watched in my hometown 2 individuals encouraging an elderly person to take money out of cash point. I didn't intervene at all because in the end he couldn't work out how to do it. But I suspect that at cash points that goes on a lot. And banks usually are supposed to notice if some large amounts of money or regular amounts of money are going out of an account unusually. in my experience, they say nothing about that. They don't do anything about that. So if individuals see or suspect that something is going on, I would encourage them to report to the police or to the social workers, etc.
Thank you very much for that. You're quite right. We'll probably talk a little later on about the issue of vulnerability, which is a key issue for us, vulnerability and well-being, and the work that we're doing jointly with Gwent Police. But what is important, and I think very rewarding here, is in terms of the Mate Crime films through People First, it's those people organising themselves together to provide peer support and advice to people in similar situations, and obviously working with sympathetic and organised groups as well, not just the police. Obviously we have a role to play that's significant, but with a wide range of agencies, but also individual citizens, as you say, who witness things. We'd never encourage anyone to put themselves in danger, I have to make that clear, but intervening where they feel, hang on, this just doesn't look right. And that's the main thrust of those 4 short films. Other people seeing it and saying, oh, actually, that's happening to me. Maybe I didn't realise what it was. Perhaps I better tell someone. And that's absolutely right. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Mann and then Councillor Outley. Did you want to pick up a point about the parking? The transfer of powers?
Yeah, I don't know whether there's any update on the transfer of the civil parking enforcement. I mean, I'm sure all of us councillors will be having seminars and various things on it, and I know the date has been delayed on a couple of occasions. Could you give us an idea of what the latest deadline, if that's the right word, for handing over powers?
Well, yes, but I must stress this is an operational matter for the Chief Constable. I have interest in it because Jeff Farrar, when he was Chief Constable, briefed me on the matter, but it was his decision. The current situation is that the deadline is by the 1st of January next year, that the councils must take over responsibility for enforcing parking. Clearly there's a lot of joint working going on now to help prepare between the police and relevant council officials to help them prepare for that, but that's the current situation.
Can I just follow that up a moment? You mentioned the one-to-one discussions you have with the chief, and the third bullet point down. Apologies for being parochial, but it mentions Ystrad, which is not a million miles from where I am. Ystrad, as you know, has the advantage and disadvantage of being a convenient place to get to for all sorts of people. In fact, you could include parking, some of the reckless parking there as antisocial behaviour, I imagine. But also that's linked up with off-roading, which is obviously a wider issue as well. Is there anything you can sort of update us on that one?
Yes, certainly. This one-to-one item is as a result of representations made to me in a number of different ways. The latest one about ASB in Ystrad, and you're quite right, some of the parking we would count as antisocial behaviour where no regard is taken to anyone else's convenience, whether it's illegal or not. The groups of youths gathering, particularly in Ystrad, was actually raised with me by constituent when I was shopping in Tesco's. That tends to happen, unfortunately, but there we are. And I then said I would take it back to the chief, who I know was in touch with the local inspector and the neighbourhood team. We've had assurances that there are patrols in that area to try to prevent, shall we say, worrying levels of gatherings. Young people gathering itself is not. There's no crime there. The issue is what happens, whether if there's drink or hyperactive substances involved is then what transpires from that. But we do recognise that for many people, particularly elderly people living in the area, and I know Ystrad very well, it can be frightening. And therefore patrols will continue, and we are alert to it as a result of people making representations. The off-roading issues isn't particularly focused at Ystrad, that's right across Gwent, particularly in the northern parts. We do have drones now. There's degrees of success in terms of identifying perpetrators. It's a seasonal offence, and we're coming into the time when we expect to pick it up again. I initiated, together with Nick Smith, MP, a forum that involves a lot of key partners, including Natural Resources Wales, as well as the police and the local authorities in the affected areas, to try and develop strategies where together we could help to dissuade those taking part in illegal off-road biking. And one of the areas that we're exploring, and I've got a meeting coming up soon with an organisation, is looking at a legal provision, with agreement with Blind Gwent Council, as it happens, in terms of developing a legal off-road area. And, you know, I'm very happy to meet them to talk about what their ideas are, because if we can get sites, I'm quite sure that most people who engage in off-road biking don't want to break the law. They'd rather pursue their sport in safety and security, in knowledge they're not bothering, well, they might be bothering because they are noisy, but they're not actually breaking any rules. They're not going to be stopped and potentially have their vehicles seized and crushed. And that has happened to, I think, 7 bikes recently in the Newport area. So action is being taken.
Commissioner, point 5.3, page 15. I wonder if you could give us your views on the activities and value of the paedophile hunters.
Yes, it's not an easy issue. I'm on record as having said that I think there should be greater dialogue with the groups, and some groups are better than others. I've got to make it clear, we've done a bit of work on this now, and I've met with 2 of the groups working within Gwent, and I don't doubt their sincerity. I don't particularly want to see Gwent going out on a limb in terms of how they operate here. There are a lot of discussions. There's a lead for the National Police Chiefs Council on this across England and Wales. And our Assistant Chief Constable, Rhiannon Kirk, leads on the issue for Gwent Police. I still think there's some merit in working with them because police resources are limited in this regard, although our new POLIT team, the Police Online Investigating Team, is also doing good work and is arresting people in real time who are viewing child pornography. But we can't catch all of them. So the good groups do inform us when they're about to perform a sting, and we will then attend. We need to be very careful. There are important health and safety issues that they don't actually put themselves in danger if the alleged, and we have to say alleged at this point, perpetrator becomes violent or aggressive. And then there's the issue of vetting. And that's one of the difficulties. Police vetting is quite strident to make sure you're working with someone who's doing it for the right reasons. So there are issues. We're continuing. The matter's not over yet, but we're working more at a national level as well as a local level. There is, I think it's fair to say, there's probably a softening of approach at a national level, but that's only an indication, that's all.
Okay, thank you. And the final point from today then on this report, on this item, is from Peter Nettle.
I note in the March meeting minutes, you talked about the panel will be provided with the human trafficking team to come and give a discussion on that presentation. Looking at the back, it's still not no date as to when that is, and I would very much encourage you to move that forward so we have a date, because it's something that people think they understand it, especially the other part you've got on there, modern slavery as well. And people think they understand slavery, but presentations bring across points that individuals who've never been involved with this stuff before suddenly recognise that that is happening somewhere where I am, or has happened to me, or has happened to someone I know, etc., etc. So I encourage you to set a date for that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an agreement that there would be a presentation. We'll negotiate with the Secretariat and get an early date in for that presentation, because the team is doing good work in terms of raising awareness within policing in particular, and will actually be presenting as well on the day one of the Royal Welsh Show this time round, but we'll make sure they come here. So we'll negotiate with the Secretariat on a date.
On the same kind of point, FGM, female genital mutilation, and it is a point that people don't understand, and I think the panel would benefit from understanding the problems of detecting that, which are massive, the efforts that Gwent police have made on that, which is commendable, but how they can move that forward. It's difficult, doctors who are examining young girls, etc., can see that, but whether they report it or not is not clear.
Yeah, it's something we have to do in partnership with the Health Board. I mean, for example, midwives might identify the sign of FGM on a woman. It doesn't mean to say it's happened in Gwent or even in this country. But then there could be alarm bells raised about any female children if they're put through the same thing. So we'll see what we can do. It'll probably have to be someone from the Health Board that needs to give a presentation of that nature, and exactly then where the role of the police would come in. But as a result of Councillor Routley's questions, we are taking this work forward.
Well, thank you very much for the update, and thank you, councillors, for the questions this morning. Moving on then to the next agenda item, the draft annual report. So I'll pass back over to you, Commissioner, to introduce the item.
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to say much on this at all. You've had the draft annual report. It is a report of the work of my office as such, and it's at a draft stage. You will note that there are some omissions in there in terms of percentages and figures, for example, because we don't have that information yet, but we will have it by the time that we hope to publish the final draft report, the final report in the autumn. So we've presented it here for your comment and observations, which we will take into account before we write the final report. Just to remind you, it is a report of the work of the office. There shouldn't be anything, by and large, that you're not aware of, because it's drawn from various reports that have been made to previous panel meetings. So with that brief overview, I'll see if there are any questions or comments on the report, unless my colleagues would want to chip in at this stage.
Just to remind the panel that the annual report is accompanied by the Chief Constable's annual report against his force delivery plan that we will be presenting. The Commissioner can update in the performance report verbal update at the next item, but that will complement this plan with a full oversight of the performance of the force as well.
Thank you very much. We're going to take it page by page, if that's okay for you. We thought it just might be an easier transition through the report. So starting on page 22, obviously page 1 of your report, Peter had a question he wanted to raise there.
Cybercrime. That is a massive problem as well. I'd just be interested on what the numbers of police that are involved in that, and the expertise other than police that are involved, you know.
I don't think we can give you that's very much a question for the Chief Constable. And as you'll see, none of the Chief Officers are here today. That's because I had a discussion with Councillor Guy and Mrs Howells about whether there should be senior police officers here on a regular basis, and it felt that's not necessarily appropriate, as your role is to challenge and support me. I can try and find that information out in terms of personnel. Are you able to assist, Sean?
I can just add, I think that a lot of training and investment is going into bringing current police officers up to date with the additional requirements, because I think we've talked previously about some crime is very much based in the cyber world, some other crime is just cyber dependent, so there are elements of cyber, but it wouldn't necessarily be allocated in that way. But what we're looking for in the future is officers will be brought in, some will be brought in because they have particular skills as well in relation to the cyber side of things. So it is a focus, but as far as numbers, we'd have to get back to you.
Does that include, it's not just police officers, it's also experts on computers, they're the ones who will find it. The police officers can police it or prosecute, but it's tracking it down is the most difficult.
And I think just to expand on that, we've got a range of, so we have some dedicated cyber teams, so teams, and we have a high-tech unit that are very much related to your previous question about fraud, scams, but also in relation to cyber work in particular. Commissioner's already mentioned the Pollitt team in relation to indecent images of children and young people. But also alongside that, as John says, it's very much being integrated as an element of neighbourhood policing so that all officers are aware. And in fact, we do have, for those of you who might be aware for following on Twitter, a cyber CSO, whose role it is very much about that low-level engagement with communities, but raising awareness around some of the issues about dangers of being online and things that need to be taken into account.
Do you wish to... Go on.
On to one point, what would be helpful when we talk about the local capacity for dealing with cybercrime, how we plug into the national picture around the National Crime Agency, etc., City of London, Action Fraud. So I think if we provide that sort of holistic viewpoint of how we tackle cyber-enabled criminality and cyber-dependent criminality would be probably helpful.
There are also links we can let you know about in relation to University of South Wales. Now there is, in the police sciences area, there are now a specific institute around cyber issues as well, so we can give you some more information about that.
But you are correct to raise it, because across England and Wales, and Gwent is no different, crime that involves cyber in one way or another now accounts for roughly half of all crime. So it is an example of how crime is changing. Very often you're dealing with serious and organised crime, especially in terms of fraud and the spreading of indecent images. And it impacts greatly on policing, including the skill sets that police officers now have to have and new recruits will have to have. For that reason, and because, as Sean mentioned, in terms of the, which I will say later on, although I can say it now, the outturn report from Gwent Police, which will be at your September meeting, you might want to consider inviting the Chief Constable or his representative to that meeting, so you can have these questions from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
I suppose in relation to the scrutiny of this, I think we will draw out your point so that we reflect in our report the focus, because as the Commissioner says, it is a priority in relation to an emerging area, and that actually was a very key aspect of the policing crime plan. So we need to reflect it. So thank you for your comments. That's very helpful. We will provide an additional briefing that provides a wider explanation on but will also feed the issue into the Chief Constable. So as he is preparing his delivery report, he can be cognizant of your comments and requests for that information within that report.
May I mention something still on page 22? Just under Priority 3, Community Cohesion, the second bullet point, supporting the targeted recruitment of new police officers from our diverse communities, that continues. we want to do more in that. Roughly 3% of our latest intake are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. We want to increase that so that we can be as representative as possible. But I've made it clear now to the Chief, and he agrees with me, and I'm arguing this on a wider basis than just us in Gwent, is that it seems clear to me that the greatest divide at the moment is actually with the economically disadvantaged communities, who, especially as policing moves towards a graduate profession, could be even more alienated from engaging with police and not see it as a career. So we will be focusing work in terms of attracting applications which could be for police cadets in the first area, special constables, as well as professional warranted officers, looking to see how we can direct work at what used to be called the community first areas in Wales, and that for me is an important area of work.
Thank you very much. Moving on to page 23 then, Councillor Jason Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think most of my questions is going to be directly as well with the Chief Constable as well, but I don't think you might be able to answer the questions which I got. It's a strategic plan of the Newport City Centre, so I think it's a bit more, it'll be more dealt with him as much with antisocial behaviour as well to go with it.
Well, certainly we could raise the issue and arrange for the superintendent for Newport and Monmouthshire to meet with you to discuss that in particular, because I know that it's an area that has been raised recently with the Chief Constable and the Commissioner, and that we're very much wanting Superintendent Ian Roberts to engage with people locally to ensure that we reflect the strategic plan in relation to, in particular, the issues that you're alluding to.
Thank you. Moving on then to page 28. You refer in this section here about ensuring value for money, so you're talking about the assurances that you've had. The interesting point here for me is about the audit outcome from TCBC for the shared resource services, saying that it needs major improvement required. Could you provide some background to that and the impact it has and what you're able to do to support that?
Yes, I noticed that point as well, and I will in a moment ask Darren Garwood to give you some more comment. Shared Resource Services, of course, also works, apart from the councils from Caerphilly, works for all the others as well, so it's not just a matter for us, but perhaps Darren, you...
Yeah, I'm through. Yeah, absolutely. The ethos of the internal audit regime is around shining the lights in on those areas that you want investigated, that you're not confident are performing to the utmost. So the Torfaen County Borough Council undertake the SRS on behalf of all the partners in it, the 4 local authorities and Gwent Police. Significant audit days are put into the audit regime comparable with the amount of days we have for Gwent Police. So Gwent Police has 155 audit days and £130 million business, and the SRS has a similar amount of days for a business of about 30 million. This issue was aired long and hard and diligently and robustly at the Joint Audit Committee last week, where we took the detailed report. The Chief Operating Officer of the SRS attended and gave Joint Audit Committee assurance that it was around that the areas they identified, they wanted to shine the light into those areas. B, it was a prioritisation issue, because a number of the audit recommendations that came out, there was no top priority audit recommendation. This is about volume of lower level audit recommendations, so there were no major significant weaknesses. It was the volume. But he gave assurances that the internal audit pieces of work that come out from the reviews and the normal business pieces of work tend to get prioritised at the same time. So when you have partners trying to prioritise bits of work, perhaps on a website or schools, systems, etc., they were all in the same mix with the audit recommendation. So the prioritisation wasn't quite appropriate. So what the Chief Operating Officer has agreed now is to separate the two and to resource the internal audit recommendations appropriately. The added complexity of the SRS is for an audit recommendation, you need all partners to agree it and prioritise it. So it's difficult. In a local authority, in the Commissioner's office, we're only with a single partner who can agree where that prioritises. The SRS sits at the centre of all the partners, and if Monmouthshire say, we don't want it prioritised, we need this piece of work done, and Caerphilly say, well, we do want it prioritised, there's that difficulty. So the Joint Audit Committee were very satisfied with the reassurance that the Chief Operations Officer gave. Nigel and I, as Section 151 officers for the Commissioner, Nigel Stevens and I, and he's the Section 151 for the force, felt assured. And importantly, the Section 151 officers of the local authorities who first saw this report before it went to our Joint Audit Committee also felt assured that this would be rectified.
So what's the major issue then? So you've explained the shared resource services, you've said there's lots of recommendations. So what is the main issue for you as the OPCC to make sure that these issues are addressed?
The main issue for me is prioritising that work in the grand scheme of what the SRS do. I took satisfaction that there were no Category 1 recommendations, severe significant risks to our investment. That took me. So it was more about the volume of low level. So the reassurance I took from a value for money perspective was that the recommendations were valuable. So we've probably all been in an internal audit regime where recommendations have come in, which are a gold standard. And sometimes it's more effort to implement the gold standard than the value you get. And I've been in that position before where an audit comes and says, this is the perfect model, and in times of austerity, capacity, capability are the priorities, you don't necessarily take it. So I took great satisfaction and value that the amount of recommendations that came through that affected the SRS, that impacted upon Gwent, were appropriate, were able to be resourced, were valuable, and moving forward, there was a clear plan.
Okay, but what are the issues that are causing you? What are the risks or the issues for the OPCC? So you may be happy that they exist and that they've been recorded accurately, but in terms of the OPCC or the Gwent Force, what are the issues that need to be addressed sort of pretty urgently to make sure the SRS is fit for purpose?
I suppose the key ones were around disaster recovery issues that we're still implementing, data protection. And without the detailed report to hand, those are the ones that I felt were key, really. We have platinum systems that you can't afford to go down. GDPR coming in, absolute assurance that the risk of data was there, or the security data was there.
So pretty significant in terms of what's going on. There are significant issues that the OPCC needs to ensure that those audit recommendations are addressed, that they are looked at, and they are taken forward.
I think just from the perspective of within the Joint Audit Committee, that we also had reassurance that a lot of the recommendations were actually implemented at the time of the review. So although the report has come out with them in, we also had that assurance that they've already been completed. So there's, as far as the next step is, we'll see what's outstanding, but that's a vastly reduced number to the ones that were actually presented within the reports.
And just to add to that, the recommendations come out of that report go into the annual governance statement. So our annual governance statement is the self-assessment check of governance across policing. And we felt confident there was an action plan for the remainder. As Sian says, there was a number between the time of the audit being completed and the time of the Joint Audit Committee, a number had been completed. But of the outstanding ones, there was a clear action plan which is articulated in the annual governance statement.
Thanks, Chair. The Commissioner did mention that Caerphilly is not part of this, and when the SRS... When not having got you done, when the SRS is looking to expand its activities into other places, i.e. Caerphilly, reading that major improvement required is a judgment. It doesn't exactly instill confidence in people who are being asked to accept the services. I'll leave it at that.
Eye contact.
Councillor Healy, I think you wanted to raise an issue around CCTV here, did you? Yeah. Councillor Healy, did you want to come in on CCTV on this point, or are you happy with the answers? Right, okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get my phrasing my question in the right manner. The audit outcome from Torfaen County Borough Council came up with a major improvement required. Are you aware, or how is the structure of scrutiny on SRS carried out across the authorities involved? Because I'm a member of Monmouthshire's audit committee, and I wasn't aware of this position. And did you find the problem being a capacity problem in trying to get bigger? And how big can SRS become? I understand the points about data protection, and I know they bring it in systems of passwords until they come out of your ears, quite honestly. You've got to have passwords for every damn thing. So, do you believe from joining the SRS as a police authority after Monmouthshire did and after Torfaen joined together, that it's become a capacity issue in terms of how the system works? And, for example, should Caerphilly join, should somebody else join, would it become too unwieldy?
Look, if I'll ask my colleagues, my professional colleagues, to give a view on that. But there is a board that the partners represent. I represent the OPCC on the board, but obviously with support from Darren, and the Chief Constable is on the board, and we make sure that our particular needs are understood. Gwent Police in particular, obviously Gwent Police is, in terms of the current members of the board, the only organisation that is a 24/7 emergency service. Clearly the local authorities have emergency provisions, but it's not a 24/7 one for everything. So we do need to make sure that our, shall we say, unique requirements are addressed. We don't give the impression that it's chaotic. That's not the case at all. It does provide valuable services for us in a cost-effective manner, but we have to ensure that ongoing, as it wishes to expand, which is a voluntary matter, no one's going to compel any organisation to come on board, that they don't lose sight of our specific needs in this regard. It did take quite a while, for example, to get our website right, but it's done now. So they do have quite a range of expertise which we can draw upon, but it's very much a matter for other local authorities, or indeed, I know that there have been rumblings from colleague Gwent, whether they wanted to come on board, for example, but that's a matter for them.
Okay, can I just intervene? I think we need to be aware of the remit of this committee, and I think we're actually straying into territory that supports the local authority. So I think I'm going to call time on that question, and we'll move on the report, okay? Moving on then, the next question then is on page 30, which is yourself, Councillor Eason, on the structure.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the OPCC structure, during the year you initiated an independent comprehensive review of the office. You say you believe that the planned structure will support your office for the foreseeable future. Are we able to have sight of that structure that you've got? Because it includes recruitment of additional staff, and how you operate it within your budget.
You're quite right. I'll ask Sean, as Chief Executive, as the head of Paid Service, to give you an update. Now, it's like what I can say is that not all the new posts are filled at this point, so we would want to be sensitive about what we say.
Yes, the review was undertaken, and there were a number of pinch points, I suppose, identified that as a result of the changes in legislation and the responsibilities on commissioners that didn't exist sort of 5.5 years ago. So particularly the things around Police and Crime Act responsibilities, antisocial behaviour, Crime and Policing Act in 2014, General Data Protection Regulation, a number of other responsibilities. And the commissioning capacity was something that we weren't built for in the first instance. So we did a fundamental review, and we have identified that there will be 3 additional posts within the office compared to where we were previously. I'll share the structure, I'll send it round to you all. We're going through the recruitment processes at the moment for the additional members of staff. But like I say, we're happy to answer any questions about that.
How will it affect your budget in terms of these 3 additional posts? You got a budget allowance?
Happy to pick this up. The overall staffing cost of the Commissioner's Office will increase by £90,000, the budget. Now, that was set aside a number of years ago. With the inception of commissions back in 2012, we'd already identified the need to reflect in commissioners' teams additional responsibilities, legal responsibilities, additional remit, as example, commissioning activities, etc., etc. So the money was set aside a number of years ago based on a understanding at that point around the development of the office. So we've been part of an incremental movement over years till we got to the point of a fundamental review in the last year.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, I'm sure that we would offer an opportunity to take you through or to brief you on the review and the outcomes of the review and the implementation of it, but equally just to provide you with assurance that the structure and the outcome of the review has very much reflected some of the conversations that we've had at this panel over the last year and a half. So particularly looking around governance capacity in relation to governance and also in relation to communications and engagement, and key focuses on making sure that we've got the right people in the right places.
Absolutely.
I wonder if I may, Chair, I know you need to move on. I just want, for the record, to make it clear that whilst I have obviously been involved in the structure and sanctioned the structure, I play no involvement in the appointment of staff to those posts. That because as a political commissioner, I don't feel it's my place to decide on who should be the members of the permanent staff. That matter is left particularly to the head of paid service, my chief executive.
Yeah, just to, one of the purposes was not only to be fit for purpose and value for money, but also to be suitable and appropriate for whichever commissioner was in post. So we wanted to make sure that the office was structured to cover all of our statutory responsibilities and to support any police and crime plan that we serve in future.
Okay, welcome your report when you make it.
Thank you very much. Moving on to page 31, a point of clarification really. The second bullet point refers to the development of a 10-year estate strategy. I wasn't aware that it had actually been developed and finalised yet, so is it just the terminology that's used?
Well, we have reported here that we were moving towards a hub and spoke model for the estate strategy, and of course the estate strategy includes the new headquarters, which we have reported here. So I think the terminology is okay, but it is a 10-year programme overall in terms of the whole of the estate strategy.
Is it work? The clarification would be the strategy sets the principles, so that's the document that I think we've brought to the panel and we've discussed at the panel. What we are now in the process of doing is having an implementation plan that drives that strategy, which I think is the clarification you're requesting.
Thank you very much. Moving on then, please know there's a quick jump to page 43, which Peter Nuttall has some questions on for you as well.
Being done that doesn't get mentioned is the groundbreaking work we're doing on complaints against the Commissioner, if any. In handling one particular complaint, which I can't talk about, we are finding the procedures of yourselves and ourselves have been altered and are continuing to alter, etc., which is a good thing.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that. I know what you're alluding to, and point well made.
On the same page, we start to talk about crime reporting. Really, I think it's very disappointing that we've got to this, page 25 of your actual report. Before this is the first mention of any of the context of crime in the area. So you're telling us about all the good work that you're doing, but actually you haven't set any context of crime. So people would have no idea reading this if, your initial premise being to prevent and reduce crime, actually how all this is set in that context. And I certainly would have expected to have seen something about that way at the front. Disappointingly, you've got recording the period at the end of November 17. We're now in June 17. You can't give us... June, sorry.
That should read end of March 2018. It's just that the wording hasn't been updated. So when the figures
right.
go in,
okay.
it will be up to the end of March 2018. 2018 for the full financial year.
Right.
So apologies for the
Okay, because obviously reading that, it looked like that's what you were going to prevent. And I appreciate at the beginning you'd said that data would not be, some of the data wouldn't be available. To have seen that sort of raised an alarm. But I think you really need to reflect in here some of the status of how crime is in the area before you sort of launch into all the good work that you're doing. It's just disappointing to see it on page 25.
Well, that point is noted, and we'll review that. And if anybody wants to check, I'd already written March 18 because we'd spotted that was a bit out of date. Oh, and by the way, just for the real eagle-eyed ones, at the beginning, when we talk in contents, the third contents down should read achievements during 2017-18 and not 16-17, but then we went on. Yeah.
That's the benefit of using search and replace in Word, isn't it? We've all made that mistake.
Could I just ask, when the acknowledging it's March 2018, when are the figures actually expected?
In the next probably couple of weeks. I think by the end of this month we normally have the figures up to the end of Q4.
Yeah, I think that is important to see a bit more demonstration there, because at the top of page 44 you're talking about how we can rest assured that you and the Chief Constable are working together, but when we can't see the visibility of that information, that's part of what gives us the assurance. Moving on to page 44 then, Councillor Routley has a question you'd like to raise.
Page 44, it's under the public confidence. I note from recent articles in the press and from reading this page here that the reduction of police officers has actually increased the public confidence regarding safety. However, this isn't reflective of the truth of Newport City Centre. Kevin Ward, the former editor of the South Wales Argus, who's now the chairman of the Business Improvement District BID, has written to yourself and also to the Chief Constable. BID represents over 400 traders in Newport, and they've written to you with fears of the lack of I'm sorry, I lost my trail there. They've actually written to you, and with regards to violent disorder within the city centre, within the daytime economy there, and as well as the nighttime economy, the public perception from traders right throughout the town is that we have lost control of policing in the city centre. I recently sat on a panel where another case was brought before us, where tolerance of police officers' levels were tested, and it was explained to me that this one gentleman had been known to the police. He was causing trouble in the city centre again, and he had been involved in several fights that evening, according to the officers, and yet he still had not been arrested. He was hurling profanities at the police officers, and language that I will not use here, and still he was not arrested. He was inciting the crowd around him, and still he was not arrested. He was sent on his way, only for 1 hour later to be arrested for an act of violent crime. That's 8. When I questioned the superintendent as to how can this be, he said, well, there's different levels of tolerance within police officers. That beggars belief. Known for 7 occasions. We have youths riding around on bicycles in the Newport bus station. I was with the managing director of Newport Transport yesterday, and he pleads for some action. He said, if you're going to raise anything here today, ask them to police the bus station for us, because the youths are hanging on to the back of the buses on their bikes and they're terrorising their customers. The public perception isn't reflected here. The public perception is dire that we have lost control of our city centre. The Chief Constable needs to address this, but I'm addressing you today. And I'm asking you, as the Commissioner, will you come and meet with the bid team, with councillors, with local people, and reassure us that maybe through your office, bringing power to bear upon the police, that they will start to regain the streets of Newport so that traders can trade and families can walk without fear of being abused or violently attacked in the city centre of Newport. People won't like me saying this, but you know what? I have to tell the truth. And this is what people are feeling now. There is no perception, as you said here, basically everything in the world is hunky-dory. Well, not in Newport it isn't.
Well, thank you for that. On the last point, we're certainly not saying that everything's hunky-dory. The figures that we have up there are for the 12 months up to September 2017. We know there are issues in Newport in particular. I mean, I'm aware of it. I've had the letter from Newport Bid. I'll have to double check what my reply was. I mean, I'm prepared to meet any organisation, any people at any reasonable time to discuss issues. But what you've described very well and very clearly is, of course, operational side of things. They're a matter for how the Chief Constable deploys his resources. And I do discuss the impact of deployment with him on a regular basis when I get feedback of the sort that I've had. And I will return to him following your intervention now, again, to see exactly what plans he has. Now, I know up to this moment he has tasked our Superintendent Ian Roberts to engage with Newport Bid and to look at the issues and how Gwent Police can best respond to them. But we can't, whilst we are recruiting more, and you'll see in an earlier section, it does talk about the number of new officers that we've welcomed and the plans that we have for further recruitment. We could always do with more officers. There's no issues about that, and that's not just a case for Gwent, that's right across England and Wales. And that comes down to the level of resources that we're provided with. But nevertheless, within that, it's important that we provide what reassurance we can to residents and traders that we are doing our best and that we're trying to make a difference. So I will take your comments back to the Chief on this and reassure. I'm very happy to meet, but it's got to be relevant. Clearly, the Chief is aware of it. I have discussed with him. He accepts it's an operational matter. He's tasked the Superintendent, and I'll find out where we're at, what his plans are, and we'll come back to you.
Chair, can I just say that this is not a matter of resources. This is a matter, and it's one of grave concern, and I know it's of grave concern to yourself. This is a matter of when I'm told, as an elected member, that officers have different tolerance levels. If I continually abuse you, if I'm continually fighting and brawling, we need officers to start enforcing the law, those who are there. We're not asking for extra resources. We are asking for police to police. That's all that's being asked for here, is for police to police. Not to walk by, not to send them on their way, go on, Johnny, off you go, and have another crack at we are asking for them to do that. And we're pleading with you, Commissioner, because this is a part of your political office, is to bring peace and stability to Gwent. And you have a responsibility for helping to return law and order to the streets.
Thank you very much, Councillor Outley. I think that point's been made, and you've agreed that you will take that back, so we'll move on through the report now. So, moving on to page 49, Peter Nuttall would like to raise a question.
Just a quick point. You're listing there 95 people who have been sentenced to court, etc. It would be of use if you got more information on the types of crime, whether it was indecent images, whether it was dealt with the Crown Court or Magistrates Court, which shows the severity of the crime. Thanks.
The online investigation team, that will relate to indecent images.
All
Yeah.
95 are indecent images.
If they say the online investigation team, that's their role, is to look at that particular work.
So, what about the other aspects of cybercrime?
We need
Okay.
to incorporate those.
Yeah, we'll cover those. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it could, if it's fraud, for example, it could be categorised in a different way. But I think it's fair now if we look at this to give greater clarity to the reader. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And moving on to the final query or feedback on the report on pages 50 and 51, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. It's the Women's Pathfinder Diversion Scheme, and it does appear to be a good initiative and something which is working pretty well. I probably should know this, but I don't. Is it a men's Pathfinder Diversion Scheme?
Happy to take the question. So the Women's Pathfinder Scheme was a specific response to a review into the state of women in the criminal justice system. However, what we've been working on for the last year and a half is about developing a full diversion scheme for all members of the public and all genders. So in particular, plans are afoot to deliver, as the Commissioner has already mentioned, women's a particular focus on women and on young people. The next phase of development, which again we're really pleased to see the award being granted, is on service personnel, and then the remainder element of the plan is very much looking at men, and in particular 18 to 25-year-old men, and diversion. But the principles of the Women's Pathfinder will apply to the broad cross-section of any offenders who are eligible to come in through diversion.
Well, thank you very much for bringing the report to us. We look forward to seeing the final version. Thank you, members, for your interest and your comments. Moving on then, performance report, a verbal update. Over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. What I hope is that the discussion up to now today has shown that the office is very busy. We're doing a lot of initiatives and work, but I do recognise, without doubt, that you can feel disappointed that we haven't yet reached the stage where we're able to provide you with a performance report of the type that's being requested. Reasons for that certainly involve the restructuring of the office, and in terms of Gwent Police, there is a recognition now of exactly what's needed, and we're very grateful to your chair, Councillor Guy, and Mrs. Howell, your vice chair, who've come to meet with us, particularly Sean and Larry, who've led on this from my office, and with Chief Superintendent Emma Ackland, who's leading for it on behalf of Gwent Police, so that we can be absolutely clear in terms of our understanding. We want to get a framework, a system that is right, and can be taken forward then with updating as necessary. A number of things have come out of this, and we now have a clear understanding. Examples have been provided, and I think it would be fair, obviously you'll speak for yourself, Chair, that there is a degree of comfort in terms that we're certainly heading in the right direction with the examples that have been prepared and used, but it's not finalised document yet. We had a further discussion on Tuesday with the Chief Constable and his senior team, including Emma Ackland, to thrash out the work that remains to be done and to get clear pledges from them about its completion. And we're very pleased that all those assurances have been received, and we know that work on it has already gone underway, and we've had some initial feedback. So I'm confident that by the time of the next panel meeting, you will have that document together with the force delivery plan that will run alongside it. There have been difficulties, in all fairness, for the police, because Gwent Police, in common with all police forces across England and Wales, are now having to prepare for force management statements, which the Inspectorate is now insisting upon as a new form of inspection. Indeed, it's a controversial measure, I think it's fair to say that, but it's something that Sir Tom Windsor, the Chief Inspector, is insisting upon, and therefore it's going to happen. But it has involved Gwent Police and all other police forces in an incredible amount of time in terms of preparation and getting their drafts agreed. And in fairness to Gwent Police, because this is from the Inspectorate, it's probably had a priority over other things, and I can understand that. It's not an excuse, but I can understand it. But there is now a recognition that hopefully with the force management statements, as far as it's appropriate, that we can blend together the force management statements together with the performance reports for yourself, and indeed our strategy and performance board approach and scheduling, which is the statutory body that I have for the main body that I have for the holding of the Chief Constable to account, which is a meeting held in public, that we can bring those together and avoid unnecessary duplication going forward. So that is the current state of play. We're very grateful for the support and patience that's been demonstrated so far, but I can assure you and other members of the public that we're addressing this, and that's why I added the point under priorities going forward. Take any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for that update and the assurances that we are moving forward. We've certainly had some, interesting meetings, and we've shared information, and we are moving forward from where we were, which is pleased to know. Any members have any points or questions they wish to raise on this matter?
Wait developments.
Okay then, thank you very much for that update and for your assurances. Moving on then to agenda item 9, the medium-term financial plan.
We update the medium-term financial projections on a quarterly basis, so this is the first update since budget set in. I circulate the background MTFP with the papers, and this presentation aims to sort of bring it to life really. There are a copy of slides which I'll circulate after the meeting. So, usual stuff, just touch base really first of all on governance. So the governance that surrounds the MTFP, Chief Officer team, who generally are key around the November time when they're confirming the bid into the Commissioner for Police and Resources moving forward. OPCC, we scrutinise and obviously take absolute ownership of the medium-term financial projections. The Joint Audit Committee provide a critical friend and very much focus on the process of budget setting and getting that assurance. I triangulate a lot of my work on a national, regional basis, so the Welsh Police Finance Resources Group and the Police and Crime Commissioners Treasurer Society, so WP, FRG and PACS, provide sort of cross-fertilisation of assumptions and pressures, etc. We have the PCP Finance Group, which undertake part of the scrutiny on your behalf when we get to the precept deliberations. And the Police and Crime Panel themselves, obviously you have the power to veto the precept. We use public engagement and consultation as a key driver for the plans, both in terms of precept at the detail level, but also around focus on delivery and aspects of, I suppose, criminality that the police should be invested in and looking at. So very important that the council has talked about that today. And also a bit of governance I don't talk about there is the fiduciary duty on me to provide that assurance around trust in the financial position of Gwent, sufficiency of reserves, robustness of estimates, etc. In terms of context, you would have seen this slide several times before. We're a £133 million business. Our net revenue expenditure, so that money raised through council tax precept and direct government grant, so ignoring specific grants and income, £123 million business. Roughly around 78% of direct staff costs. So you can see through austerity where the focus needs to be. In 1819, in terms of government grant to precept split, we're 58% funded by government grant, 42% funded by precept. Back pre-austerity, that was a 70-30 split, so you can see how government grant has come down and precept has come up, and there's a slide later on which picks that up. A bit more context, the last comprehensive spending review in 2015 talked about flat cash for commissioners on the fundamental assumption that they maximised precept income. The next CSR is forecast for 2019, next financial year. And you'll recall the Chief Constable's presentation back in December when he talked about the changing focus of criminality, the changing world, the vulnerability, the safeguarding dynamic. And certainly the chief officers have just had an away day looking at delivering the police and crime plan, the force delivery plan, the National Policing Vision 2025. And again, there's 6 priorities are around vulnerability, domestic violence, sexual assault, rape, etc. Enabling and embracing more agile working, flex workers or flexible workers, field workers, fixed workers, etc. Focus on the estate strategy and the delivery with a key focus around headquarters and custody. Again, one of the key points was focusing on corporate communications, first point of contact, how we interface with the public and provide a public service, which links into an investigation strategy, how we do more at the local level around lower volume crime investigations. Workforce reform was another key attribute of the away day. And finally, welfare of staff and organisational development. So again, a changing world of how we enable and facilitate and meet the changing dynamics of crime. In terms of funding, you'll recall that we've had 27% cash cuts to 18-19, so over the sort of 10 years austerity, a quarterly cash budget's gone. When you add in the effect of inflation, you're up around 40%. You'll recall from budget setting that a slight change on the CSR position of flat cash, assuming you maximise income. The 18-19 settlement, the government flat cashed our grant funding ahead of precept. And they also provide a sort of a degree of comfort in that the 1920 settlement will be flat cash again. So basically, for 18-19 and 19-20, you'd have the same government grant you had in 17-18. There was a significant caveat on the 1920 financial year that it would only be flat cash if the service made clear, I suppose, progress against agreed milestones on productivity, efficiency of the service and transparency of reserves. So that's a key sort of requirement of commissioners moving forward to ensure that that funding offer is actually comes to fruition. You'll recall the ongoing issue of the £6 million of impact of funding formula changes. So that's over and above the impact of government grant. So if government grant is flat cash, we get the same amount of money we did in 17-18, but then there's a secondary impact on Gwent that we could lose £6 million because of the reallocation of the slices of pie, even though the overall pie is going to be kept the same. A significant impact on revenue resources is that capital grant has been reduced by 60% since 14-15. The only way you pay for capital assets are you either use reserves, revenue contribution to capital, borrow, which has a revenue sting, or I suppose, aside from capital grant, plug the gap with recurrent spend. So as capital grant is reducing to the tune that the amount we currently get in capital grant pays for not even half of what our fleet replacement programme is a year, puts significant pressure on the revenue position. The precept increase in the MTFP goes back to the 3.99% per annum, which you'll recall was the amount we needed to flat cash our government grant coming in, assuming 2% reductions moving forward post CSR. And the precept tax base, we've taken the average of the last 3 years and it equates to a growth of just shy of 1%. And that's the money that we obtain by just growth in the number of properties that we can levy council tax upon. We've updated the expenditure position as well. 1267 officers moving forward. We try to draw a bit of a consistent line through the number of officers required to deliver policing in Gwent over the next 5 years. 132 PCSOs in 1819 and 1920, but then reducing down because PCSO grant is not, when we receive that from Welsh Government, it's not inflation proofed. So as pay awards come in each year for PCSOs, etc., the grant doesn't keep a pace with that. So in order to keep a pace with the cash money we get in, you actually need to reduce the numbers to account for the pay awards you've got to give to the remainders. So it does look at reducing 132 down to 122 over the life of the MTFP to 22-23. 647 staff, so that's the sort of staffing model built into the plans moving forward. The 18-19 budgets have all been finalised, rolled forward into this MTFP now. We've built in 2% pay awards, incremental drift and pension uplift, and 3% general inflation and 5% utility inflation to future-proof that. Some significant pieces of expenditure moving forward. Body armour replacement. Body armour has a finite life. You almost have to give it an MOT every year to make sure it's fit for purpose. So we need to do a significant replacement programme on a periodic basis. Over on the national position, the Home Office deliver a significant amount of national ICT programmes in collaboration with the Police ICT Company and other forces. So significant investment is required around the National Law Enforcement Database, which looks to collapse a number of old, not fit for purpose and bureaucratic database that policing use. Police National Database being one, Police National Computer. Home Office biometric system, so looking at facial recognition software, DNA, fingerprints, etc. So a number of these programs are delivering at the national level, but then there's a number of local costs that need to be built in for both the sort of the top slicing of that program and also the revenue impact of when they land. And again, expenditure, investment around learning and development. We've talked long and hard in this forum around well-being of staff, organisational development, personal development. So that's some of the expenditure we're seeing coming through. Still got capex of best part of 45 million over the next 5 years, and other long-term projects of 14.6 million over the next 5 years. We talked about these at budget setting. So programs that are not necessarily capital in nature from an accounting perspective, but have a long-term delivery tail. Things like Project Fusion, Digital Services Division with South Wales Police to get state-of-the-art sort of mobile data provision across policing. Therefore, our reserves position, because we've only got finite reserves we finance capital spend on because of the demise of capital grant, we use all our capital reserves by 2021, which is 2 years shy of the current MTFP projections. So we are looking to borrow in the medium term about £12 million. And that has a revenue impact. So you've got to pay that borrowing, pay that interest. The next set of variables that you'll get used to, that I always talk about when setting the precept and talking about medium-term financial projections, efficiencies. We've delivered best part of £50 million of efficiencies since 08-09 to 18-19, so significant work there. However, the remaining recurrent balance, when we bank all the efficiencies up to and including 18-19, there's still about £11 million worth of efficiencies left to deliver. You'll recall I talked at length about HMIC value for money profiles during budget setting. These don't give you the answer, they just shine a light potentially on where you could be slightly different in costs or significantly different in costs to your most similar forces. It doesn't necessarily mean you're more expensive, and it may reflect local policy. For example, we have a higher cost of policing for neighbourhood policing because we have PCSOs. Our most similar force like Durham don't have that Welsh Government grant. So it doesn't always give you the answer to why you're more expensive. That might be a policy or strategy perspective. And it doesn't always, I suppose, determine the cheapest is the best. So we may want to have a more costly model but get better effectiveness at the back end. But within the plan, you'll be pleased to know that the future recurrent deficit of 10.7 is matched by efficiency schemes. The only caveat around there is some of them may not be the most palatable, because we've talked about 78% staff staff budgets to total budget, but the Staying Ahead programme work hard on ensuring that they are true efficiencies and not just budget cuts. So we've virtually got a balanced budget by 22-23, just a very small deficit there. We talked at length around the economy at budget setting. So GDP growth is still around 1.5% per annum. It was reduced down. The Office of Budget Responsibility, OBR, refreshed their November position in March, and it was largely the same as I reported to you previously in December and January. So inflation is still forecast to reduce from its current high down to about 2% over to 2020. We still have the uncertainty of Brexit. So 3.7 billion has been set aside currently in budgets, and we still talk about a £40 billion divorce bill that is still there, and the impact of that upon that. Unemployment is still stable at the moment. It was 4.5 when I reported last. It's 4.2% currently. External influences. We talked about emerging demand, the chief presentation, the things I've just talked about around their away day. It's all there front and centre. We talk about public expectations. You'll recall, and a slide will bring this to light later on, that early in the next decade, the precept bypasses the government grant as the major funding of policing in Gwent. So the importance of the public engagement, the public voice, the public focus becomes more acute. A key point that the public do not always see the amount of work we do around non-visible policing, protecting the vulnerable, safeguarding. We've talked about the POLIT team today, we've talked about cybercrime, we've talked about the ICT PCSO, all there keeping the public safe but not necessarily visible policing. And I suppose adding to that the complexity of crime investigation now. We talked previously around that balance between uniform resource and investigative resource. There's always the balance between the local, the regional, national. Again, cybercrime being a good example of how we link in with national assets around delivering that reassurance and investigative influence. Partners retrenching through austerity, local authority, third sector. There's always the obvious thrust, I suppose, as budgets get tighter, you retrench. But actually, I suppose the art to this is investing your way out of austerity, dealing on upfront issues on prevention, diversion, before dealing with the reactive elements. Gwent public finances, I always triangulate my precept, my MTFP conversation on local authorities and the third sector, and similarly along Welsh policing finances. What are the fire and rescue services? What are the the other three commissioners embracing, dealing with, tackling with risks, opportunities, etc., and where their MTFPs are going? Financial risks and opportunities. I've talked about Brexit and economy. Her Majesty's Treasury's efficiency review, £2.4 billion banked from an original £3.5 billion banked. What's the next steps to that? What's the next HMT push in line with the comprehensive spending review next year, which is the next point of my slide. The risk around funding formula, the appetite of government to see that through, because significant work was done in the funding formula, but Brexit and other issues, snap general elections, has perhaps put that a little way down the priority list. I always talk about Home Office reallocation. So when the overall pot of policing resource is set, not all of it finds its way to commissioners. A number of them are top sliced for HMIC, Independent Office of Police Scrutiny, and the significant investment, particularly around emergency services network replacement for Airwave and big ICT enabling programs. And also the risk around capital financing. So the more I borrow, the more risk I have around fluctuations to interest rates, and you know, they're at all-time lows at the moment. What would that look like in the next 5 years? We've banked best part of £50 million worth of efficiencies. How sustainable are they moving forward? But there are a couple of opportunities. Income generation, the force has a designated income generation officer working actively around fees and charges, community infrastructure levies and Section 106 grants, other wider grants, and charging for police services. So it'll never plug the gap, but the more you can attract and generate, the better. Legislative changes, again, this has been caught up in perhaps the Home Office and government having bigger fish to fry at present. But there was talk around commissioners having the same sort of powers as local authorities around the general power of competence and what financial, I suppose, incentive that would come with that. And again, the commissioning opportunity. We've talked about the structural review within the Commissioner's office today, and taking real advantage of the Commissioner's unique position to commission services with other partners to deliver consistent products, to deliver the needs of public in Gwent. So that's a key opportunity. In terms of performance, we talked about budget setting around the forecast outturn of £6 million being recurrently committed at year end. That was an outturn that was due to the timing of police officer recruitment. We hit full establishment at year end. We will maintain full establishment moving through 18-19. And HMIC peel assessments at the year end, what had been produced by year end was 3 years of good assessment, but the latest effectiveness assessment requires an improvement. So we need to maintain the Gwent Police performance around delivering effectiveness, legitimacy and efficiency around the peel assessments, and ensuring that we provide from the Commissioner's office that support, that scrutiny and that resource. I'll just touch briefly, on the last point, the robust audit assurance. So a very good point, very good debate today around the Torfaen County Borough Council report and how that actually manifests itself as robust assurance or robust audit regime, and how we maintain a robust audit assurance moving forward. It's a key tool in my locker around demonstrating value for money. So the next couple of slides are trying to bring, I suppose, the numbers to light. You've seen this first graph before, and it aims to highlight the shift in our funding sources. So you'll see the top line is the 8 years of austerity manifesting the reduction in government grant, and the bottom line being how Precept has risen over the years to get to a point in sort of just shy of 22-23 where they cross. So that's the point around the majority shareholders. If I map those two lines together, it manifests as the red line on the next slide, which basically shows over the last 10 years, even with Precept increases, reductions in government grant, we've only flat cashed our funding. And flat cash funding doesn't pay for pay awards, doesn't pay for inflation, doesn't pay for developments in policing, it pays for nothing. So the blue line articulates that if we'd left our expenditure unchecked, did nothing, just kept the same establishments, the same pressures coming on year, we would have grown to that £60 million gap over those 10 years. But obviously we've had the Staying Ahead 8 review, which on the next slide has brought those two lines together. So between 8-9 and 18-19, those two lines are one, because we've closed that the gap that had appeared at that point was £49.5 million. We've closed it. So what this next slide does is just show how all the efficiencies we banked to date, moving forward, the expenditure line increases again, and the funding line goes down slightly, because we've talked about flat cash funding and Precept increase, but also this £6 million hit of the funding formula. So it opens up a gap of about 10.7 million between 19-20 and 22-23. And the final slide shows the effect of when I wind in those forecast efficiencies that we currently have of 10.6 million, we close that gap. So we do have balanced budgets, but all predicated on two key things: continuing Precept increase of 3.99% and £10.6 million worth of efficiency savings. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I put the reserves one in. What this reserves slide aims to show is the depletion of reserves over the medium term. So you'll see the capital reserves being the highest slide in there, and how they're utilising, delivering the estate strategy, the fleet strategy, and the ICT strategy. It's a key point in the I suppose the financial world at the moment, because one of the key points that the Home Secretary and the Minister of State for Police and Fire said that they wanted transparency of reserves, that will play a large part in securing flat cash funding in 1920. So all commissioners need to publish reserve strategies moving forward, identifying how they're utilising the purpose of reserves, etc., etc. It's pleasing to note that Gwent, the commissioner, has a pass in that. So the The Associated Police and Crime Commissioners have done a sort of bit of a mystery shopper exercise, looking at all 43 commissioners to see whether their published reserve strategies would meet a test by the Home Office for transparency, and we were one of the few commissioners' officers who passed that. And I suppose the key messages contained therein is the significant depletion of reserves. You'll note Gwent is one of the highest, or the highest, forces if you take reserves as a percentage of their overall budget, but all utilised. And I talk about reserves, it's reserves and committed funds, because generally we only have one reserve, the general reserve, £4 million. The remainder, the best part of 50 million, are committed, as I've already outlined. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Darren, for that very interesting review and taking us through. My only question really is, you talk about needing to make another £10 million savings over the next couple of years, and I'm sure you're going to assure me it can be achieved, and then no doubt that I will, but what are the two main areas then that are going to be affected or improved within that review?
The two big ones for me are around workforce mix. So we've talked at length before around with best part of 80% staff. So if you're going to go for find £10 million, where are you going to find it to? So it's not about reducing police officer numbers, but there's a piece of work that's been commissioned by the force, look at that mix between warranted officer powers at the police officer level and a police staff equivalent, and where they really need, because there's a significant difference in the salaries. That's not decrying the need for visible policing, that's a key component. Neighbourhood policing is still a cornerstone of policing in Gwent, but it's that mix. Okay. The second one would be productivity and efficiency around, I suppose, national initiatives around procurement, around key significant investment in new services, new systems that would reduce or improve police productivity. So we talked about mobile data at length. We've talked about IR3. It's a system in a sort of a telemetry system in cars, so you can identify where individuals being posted and investigating. So it's about those. So key things about workforce mix, productivity of staff. I don't know whether any. Not happy.
Thank you very much. Over to members. Any questions, Councillor Mann?
Thanks, Anna, and usual comprehensive run through. Could I request yet again that when we have things, they are more readable? Yeah. When the recommended size is 14 point, this must be about a third of that size, I think.
I actually, if I may, I was the guinea pig for this to see if I could read it. My reading glasses, fortunately, are very good. But
well, maybe I need new ones, I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, and you'll probably notice that Tony actually got the back to try and read the screen, because the screen was even more unreadable than the actual handout. So there we are. I mean, it's very sort of, I don't know, disappointing is the right word, but I mean, you spelt it out. I mean, in a few years' time, the funding will be 50-50. I mean, it appears the UK government is very happy to take our taxes, but is also very happy to give less and less back. At the same time, to ask the local council taxpayers to dig deeper and deeper into their pockets, and the funding we see there, it's going £10 million down on the one side. Local council taxpayer is expected to find £10 million to compensate. I mean, the total frustration for people is that they are paying more and more and more and more without seeing any improvement in service. And unfortunately, the service is, in a lot of perception, a lot of people is going in the other direction, in spite of the fact that people are paying out more and more money. I mean, if you relate it to spreading butter on bread, we get to the stage we can hardly see the butter at all. You can only see the bread. I mean, it's as bad as that, really. I note you've been optimistic about the apprenticeship levy scheme. Hopefully, that will your optimism will prove to be founded.
And we have got part of financial provision, and if it doesn't come to
fruition,
we remove that and improve the
I say I'm sure we note the reserves position. I think we know there are plans to around headquarters and so on. But it's the overall strategy, and that was announced. I know it seems like 8 or 10 years ago now. Well, you know, we're reducing the funding. Don't worry, you can stick a hand in your pocket and do it. I mean, if people felt that they were paying more for a better service, and this is not criticising the police or the commissioner, it's the fact that if you are coping with basically level resources, you are going to provide less and less of a decent service. And that is the sad fact of the times that we're living in.
If I may respond to this, because in fairness to Darren, as a permanent member of staff, as the Chief Finance Officer, he has to work with what he has. I'm in a different position. I'm an elected commissioner, and I can assure you that, especially through the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, we are lobbying government very hard in terms of the police funding. And hopefully we're making some progress. The new Home Secretary gave us some hints that was going to be the case, perhaps. But, you know, we will continue the pressure. Absolutely. And, of course, you know that this is true of all public service, that we're trying to do more with less. And soon we could get to the point where we have to do less with less. And that's why it's my job, difficult though it is, to ensure that Gwent Police, from whatever source, will have sufficient money to at least provide a minimum acceptable service. And that's why I get very little choice to raise the precept. Now, as Darren has put on his slides, those are current projections. It'd be marvellous if that changed as a result of government action. But it's right and proper that Darren, as an accountant, as my Chief Finance Officer, works on the basis of what is most likely to be on the current situation and gives me advice accordingly. But it is something that does concern all police and crime commissioners, and I have to say that's cross-party, I have to say, in my experience. They want to make sure that policing is adequately funded, because we do want to, as every public service does, want to provide the best service that's possible. We have certain advantages being in Wales, in that we get funding, of course, for PCSOs from the Welsh Government, which is a voluntary contribution, 101 of them based in Wales. If we didn't have that, we'd be down to about 25, 26, which would be completely unsustainable. But that is what's facing English forces.
Could I say no criticism of Darren at all? I mean,
well, I do.
But as other finance staff, he's working with what he's got, and I do recognise that yourself and other commissioners are making the noises. Unfortunately, you appear to be up against a very determined organisation who are just hell bent on reducing resources year on year as it goes, and reducing the cost of public service. We know what the agenda is. And I wish you all the best in your endeavours to try and persuade them in a different direction. That's where we are, really, isn't it?
Thank you, Councillor Rugby.
Can I thank you for your transparency and well delivered presentation. It is worrying, though, if you listen to the presentation about the community support officers going forward, to stand still or to keep up with wage increases or income point increases. We have to reduce the numbers. So the reality going forward is that the community safety officers are going to be reduced. And yet we're asking the public to contribute more year on. And there's only so much you can rinse the pockets of those fee-paying taxpayers. And I think we're going to end up in a situation whereby even they're not going to be willing to support the financial commitments of Gwent Police. And I don't know where we go from here on. It is a cross-party concern. There's no politics in this room that are saying that central government is right or the Welsh Assembly is right, or the Welsh Government is right. Yes, they volunteer, but the pressures upon the Welsh Government could see that voluntary practice reduced again. And it's not without, it's not scaremongering, but when you get down to the finite detail of the finances of the Welsh Government, they too, like councils, are feeling the pinch. We all have to work together here, and we are holding you to account, and I'm looking at the Police and Crime Commissioner. But we're not just going to throw stones at you. We want to support you. We want to help you in every way we can, because we want to make Gwent a safer and the perception a well-policed area. But it is worrying when I listen to the financial advice that things are only going to get worse. I think that is the alarm bells ringing for me. But thank you for your honesty, at least.
Thank you very much. Any members have any additional questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Darren, for that. And moving on then to agenda item 10, the Forward Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. Members will have before them is the work programme to take us up to December 2018. As members will see in September, we've got a number of items proposed. We've got the performance report and strategic equality plan annual update report, obviously the PCC's update report, the MTFP and budget setting timetable, and Treasury Management year-end. There's a number of items. It's also looking at possibly the apprenticeship levy coming through as a sort of update information. That could be part of the Commissioner's update possibly, or a more detailed report depending on what's available. And possibly inviting the Chief Constable was mentioned is if we're going to have the delivery plan as part of the annual report, if members are willing to accept that invitation. And then in December, we've got the performance reporting and the PCC update and the initial budget briefing. I think, Chair, you wanted to bring something in as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of reinforce the point. If we could have something brought to the September meeting about the apprenticeship levy, that would be really helpful, because you've touched upon the significance of it today. In November, there's a national conference of police and crime panels, and when we had the meeting on Tuesday with the WLGA, it was something that was brought up generally by everybody about the importance of it and what could be done. And there was talk about doing something as a Welsh regional area. So I think if we could have something brought to that meeting, we'd be informed to go to the November meeting about how we can assist, and then we can bring an update back at the December meeting. So I'm not talking huge detail, but something that talks about your main issues. What are you doing as the PCC to be able to say, this is what we've progressed, the points you talked about earlier, and that would put us in a position to compare them with other PCCs, what they are doing, and taking that forward, if we could.
Very happy to give that feedback at the next meeting. I can tell you now that this isn't only an issue for us in Wales. I sit on the board of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and they too are very concerned and make representations to the Home Office because they don't want to see that divergence in terms of standards between the English police areas and the Welsh police areas, because it's to no one's interest whatsoever. And the College of Policing feel the same way. So there is a lot of understanding and organising out there, and I hope by the time of our next meeting I have clarity. But I will, whatever it is, I'll report it back.
That's lovely. I think it would be helpful for all members to understand, and then if we need to have a discussion prior to going to the national conference about what we think we can do, it gives us that time to have that discussion. And I think then it's just some consideration in terms of, we talked about the cybercrime, the human trafficking and the sickness absence, but when you'd be in a position to provide us with those reports. Possibly not the September meeting, because that will grow, but thank you very much.
Suggest that I liaise with the Commissioner's office and we'll come up with some dates for the next meeting.
Can I just ask, are the meeting dates for next year provisional, or are they...
I'll liaise with the Commissioner's office regarding the work programme changes, and at the same time I can circulate the dates then for taking us up into the summer next year.
So these are suggested dates at the moment.
Okay, any further questions or issues anybody would like to raise? No? Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance and confirm that the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much.